Imagine thinking a $30 million Malibu mansion will save your life, then learning you were chosen because you're the easiest one to break. Tonight, you'll meet Sarah Mitchell, a mother 3 days from foreclosure, an offer too perfect to question, and a seller whose comatose wife walks in, very much awake. Each door in that glass palace opens to a new lie, forged trusts, stolen art, and a buyer whose accent hides a badge. And when the handcuffs snap, the cruelest twist isn't the crime, it's the family name on the deed. Who really owns the mansion on the cliff? Why was Sarah targeted, and how does a 16-year-old turn the hunters into the hunted? Live. Stay with me to the end for the confession, the bloodline secret, and the moment everything flips from survival to justice. If this kind of high-stakes mystery hooks you, tap. Like to boost the story, drop your boldest prediction in the comments, share it with a friend who loves twists, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the reveal and the fallout. Sarah Mitchell sat in her cramped office on the 14th floor of a building that had seen better days, staring at the foreclosure notice that had arrived by certified mail that morning. The paper trembled in her hands, not from emotion, but from the air conditioning unit that rattled like a dying animal every time it kicked on. 3 months behind on rent, her real estate agency was giving her until Friday to clear her desk. Friday. 3 days to pack up 15 years of a career that was circling the drain. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, but its financial devastation continued to ripple through her life like aftershocks from an earthquake. Jason had somehow managed to drain their joint accounts before the lawyers could freeze them. He'd claimed it was for business investments that had gone bad, but Sarah knew better. The pictures his mistress had posted on Instagram from Cabo told a different story. Now Sarah was left with nothing but debt, a crumbling career, and a teenage daughter who deserved so much better than the disaster her life had become. Her phone rang for what felt like the 100th time that day. She glanced at the caller ID, another creditor. She let it go to voicemail, adding it to the pile of problems she couldn't solve. Her last 3 clients had walked away in the past month, choosing more successful agents with better track records and offices that didn't smell like mildew and broken dreams. She was drowning, and everyone could smell the desperation on her like cheap perfume from a drugstore clearance rack. "Mom, are you okay?" Emma's voice came from the doorway, soft and concerned. Her 16-year-old daughter stood there with her backpack slung over one shoulder, having walked the 3 miles from school because Sarah couldn't afford to fix the car's transmission. The girl's dark hair was damp with sweat, her face flushed from the Southern California heat. "Fine, sweetheart," Sarah lied, quickly sliding the foreclosure notice under a pile of unsigned contracts that would never be completed. "Just finishing up some paperwork. Did you eat lunch today?" Emma nodded, but Sarah caught the slight hesitation, the way her daughter's eyes shifted away. They were both getting good at lying to protect each other. The school lunch account had been frozen 3 weeks ago when Sarah's credit card was declined. Emma had probably spent another day pretending she wasn't hungry, maybe accepting charity from friends who pitied her. The thought made Sarah's stomach clench with a mixture of guilt and rage at how far they'd fallen. Sarah was about to suggest they go home and she'd make something from whatever was left in their increasingly bare pantry when the door to her office suddenly opened without a knock. A man walked in like he owned not just the office, but the entire building, possibly the whole city block. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Sarah made in a month back when she was actually making money. The fabric moved like water, clearly custom tailored. His shoes gleamed with the kind of shine that came from professional care, not the rushed buffing Sarah gave her own worn heels before client meetings. His smile was confident, almost predatory, revealing teeth that were too perfect to be natural. But it was his eyes that made Sarah sit up straighter. They were calculating, assessing, like a shark that had just spotted something interesting in the water. They held something Sarah couldn't quite read, a depth that suggested this man was playing a game several moves ahead of everyone else. "Sarah Mitchell?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. His voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of East Coast prep school underneath the California polish. "My name is Marcus Blackwood. I understand you specialize in discreet, high-end real estate transactions." Sarah almost laughed out loud. Her last sale had been a studio apartment in Van Nuys that had taken 4 months to close because the buyer's financing kept falling through. The commission had barely covered her electricity bill. High-end was not a term anyone had associated with her in over a year, but something about the way he said discreet made her sit up straighter, smooth her wrinkled blazer, and project a confidence she hadn't felt in months. "That's right," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "How can I help you, Mr. Blackwood?" He sat down without being invited, his movements fluid and controlled. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out the latest iPhone, the one Sarah couldn't dream of affording, and began showing her a series of photos. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just a house. It was a mansion, a palace, a monument to wealth and power perched on the Malibu cliffs, like something out of a movie. Glass and stone and infinity pools that seemed to pour directly into the Pacific Ocean. The architecture was modern but timeless, the kind of place that would be featured in magazines she could only flip through at the grocery store checkout. $30 million property, Marcus said casually, as if he were discussing the weather. "I need it sold quickly and quietly. Cash buyers only. I'm willing to offer 15% commission to the right agent." Sarah's mind raced, the mental math happening automatically despite her shock. 15% of 30 million was $4.5 million. 4.5 million. Enough to save everything. Enough to pay off the debts, get a decent apartment, buy a reliable car, put money aside for Emma's college. Enough to show Jason and everyone else who had written her off that she wasn't a failure. Enough to rebuild not just her life, but her daughter's future. "Why me?" she asked, forcing herself to be suspicious despite the desperate hope blooming in her chest. "There are bigger agencies, more connected agents. Century 21, Coldwell Banker, people with actual resources and reputations that haven't been destroyed by a messy divorce." Marcus leaned back in the uncomfortable chair, making it look like a throne. "They ask too many questions," he said simply. "They want to involve teams of people, marketing departments, social media campaigns. I need someone who can handle this personally, quietly. My wife, Victoria, is in a coma following a car accident. Brain dead, the doctors say. She's being kept alive by machines while I make arrangements. I have power of attorney, but I'd rather not deal with the publicity that would come from listing this property traditionally. The vultures would circle, wanting to know every sordid detail." He paused, his eyes boring into hers. "I need someone hungry enough to work outside normal channels, but professional enough to handle the transaction properly. Someone who won't ask uncomfortable questions about why I need the sale done so quickly. Someone who understands that opportunity often requires flexibility with conventional rules." Something felt off, multiple somethings actually. His story had holes large enough to drive a truck through. Why not just use a private sale company that specialized in this kind of thing? Why approach her specifically? How did he even know she existed? But $4.5 million had a way of quieting doubts, of making red flags look like festive decorations. Sarah glanced at Emma, who was pretending to do homework on her phone while obviously eavesdropping on every word. Her daughter's shoes had holes in them she'd been trying to hide with strategic placement of duct tape. She'd been wearing the same 3 outfits in rotation for months, claiming it was a minimalist fashion choice, when really they couldn't afford anything new. The girl deserved better. She deserved everything. "When would you like to start?" Sarah asked, the words coming out before she could stop them. Marcus smiled wider, and something about it made Sarah's skin crawl even as her mind counted millions. "Tomorrow," he replied, standing up and placing a business card on her desk. The card was heavy stock, minimalist, just his name and a phone number in raised lettering. "Meet me at the property at noon. Come alone. Bring whatever paperwork you will need to begin the process. And Sarah?" He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. "This opportunity won't wait. If you're not interested, I'll find someone who is. There are plenty of hungry agents in this city. But I think you're the right person for this. Don't prove me wrong." After he left, the office felt smaller somehow, as if his presence had consumed all the oxygen and left them gasping. Emma looked up from her phone, her young face creased with worry that no 16-year-old should have to carry. "Mom, that seemed like an answer to our prayers," Sarah finished, though even she could hear the desperation in her voice overshadowing logic. "I was going to say suspicious," Emma said quietly. Really suspicious. Who just walks in offering millions of dollars? How did he even know about you? And why does he want you to come alone? Sarah moved around the desk and pulled her daughter into a hug, feeling how thin Emma had gotten in the past few months. They'd both been living on ramen and peanut butter sandwiches, pretending it was a choice rather than necessity. Sometimes good things happen to good people, Sarah said, trying to convince herself as much as her daughter. We're due for some luck. Emma pulled back, her eyes so like her father's it sometimes hurt to look at them, full of concern. Mom, when has anyone in our family ever been lucky? She had a point, but Sarah couldn't afford to listen to it. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat at their kitchen table, the one they'd bought at a yard sale to replace the one Jason had taken, and researched Marcus Blackwood online. The internet gave her fragments, pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. There were scattered mentions of tech ventures, a few photos from charity galas where he was always in the background, never the focus, articles about innovative startups that mentioned him as an investor but never went into detail. His wife Victoria appeared in a few society photos from years past. Beautiful in an ethereal way, elegant, always slightly apart from the crowd, as if she was observing rather than participating. She had the kind of bone structure that belonged on magazine covers, and an expression that suggested she knew secrets about everyone in the room. But there was nothing recent, nothing about an accident, nothing about her current condition. The mansion itself was a ghost online. No listings past or present, no history on real estate sites, just whispers on luxury real estate forums about a property that was never supposed to be for sale. One commenter claimed it belonged to a foreign billionaire who never visited. Another said it was owned by a shell company connected to money laundering. A third insisted it was haunted. None of them had proof, just speculation and rumors that led nowhere. Sarah pulled up Google Earth and found the address Marcus had given her. The satellite image showed a massive structure that seemed to grow out of the cliff itself, defying gravity and logic. Even from above, it was breathtaking. But something nagged at her. The image was dated 2 years ago, but the property looked lived in. There were cars in the driveway, furniture visible through the windows, not the abandoned feeling of a house with an owner in a coma. She closed the laptop and went to check on Emma, who was asleep in her tiny room, textbooks scattered around her as she'd fallen asleep studying. Even with everything falling apart, she maintained straight A's, as if academic success could somehow compensate for their financial failures. Sarah carefully moved the books and covered her daughter with a blanket that had been washed so many times it was threadbare. Back in her own room, Sarah stared at the ceiling and tried to quiet the voice in her head that sounded annoyingly like her mother, the one that said if something seemed too good to be true, it probably was. But what choice did she have? The foreclosure notice gave her 3 days. Her car was one breakdown away from being scrap metal. They had maybe $50 in the bank and a maxed out credit card that was about to be canceled. She needed this deal. More importantly, Emma needed this deal. And for her daughter, Sarah would walk into any trap, take any risk, make any deal with whatever devil was offering. The drive to Malibu the next day felt like crossing into another dimension, a world where Sarah no longer belonged but desperately wanted to enter. Her dying Honda Civic wheezed and protested up the Pacific Coast Highway, while Ferraris and Bentleys and cars she couldn't even identify passed her like she was standing still. The engine made a grinding noise that had started a week ago and was getting progressively worse. She'd Googled the sound and knew it was probably the timing belt, a $1,000 repair that might as well have been $1 million for all her ability to pay for it. The address Marcus had given her led to a private road that branched off the highway, winding up into the hills. A security gate that looked like it belonged to a military installation blocked the path, but it opened smoothly before she could even reach for the intercom button. Security cameras tracked her progress, their red lights blinking like eyes. Someone was watching, had been expecting her. The road curved and climbed, each turn revealing glimpses of the ocean that became more spectacular and vertigo-inducing. Then, suddenly, the mansion revealed itself in full, and Sarah had to pull over just to process what she was seeing. It wasn't just big, it was architecturally impossible. A structure that seemed to float between sky and sea, supported by physics she didn't understand. The photos hadn't done it justice. They couldn't capture the way light moved through the space, the way the building seemed to breathe with the ocean breeze. It was easily 20,000 square feet, probably more. Glass walls that had to be 2 stories tall reflected the sky and ocean, creating an illusion that the house extended infinitely in all directions. The infinity pool wasn't just a pool, it was a work of art that seemed to pour directly into the Pacific, no visible edge between human creation and nature. Gardens cascaded down the cliffsides in terraces, each level containing what looked like different ecosystems, from tropical to desert to what appeared to be a Japanese meditation garden. Sarah parked her embarrassing car next to Marcus's Tesla, the contrast between the vehicles so stark it was almost comedic. She tried to dress professionally, wearing her best remaining suit, but standing in front of this monument to wealth, she felt like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. Impressive, isn't it? Marcus appeared beside her, seemingly from nowhere, making her jump. Today he was dressed more casually, still designer, but calculated casual, the kind of outfit that looks simple, but probably cost more than her monthly rent. 22,000 square feet of living space, smart home technology throughout, wine cellar worth more than most people's houses. And the views? He gestured toward the Pacific, where dolphins were actually jumping in the distance, as if he'd arranged them for effect. It's incredible, Sarah breathed, her professional composure cracking. But the deed, I'll need to verify ownership before I can list it. Standard procedure. Of course. Marcus produced a leather folder that probably cost more than her entire outfit. The property is held in trust, the Blackwood Family Trust. As I mentioned, my wife is incapacitated, but I have full legal authority to liquidate assets for her medical care. Sarah reviewed the papers, her real estate training kicking in despite her awe. Everything looked legitimate on the surface, but there were oddities. The trust formation date was recent, very recent, less than 6 months old. Properties like this didn't usually change hands or get restructured so quickly. And Victoria's signature on the trust documents looked practiced, mechanical, like someone had traced it or signed it multiple times to get it right. There was none of the natural variation you'd expect in a real signature. I'll need to run some standard checks, Sarah said carefully, not wanting to spook him, but unable to completely ignore her instincts. Marcus's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I was hoping to avoid bureaucracy. That's why I chose you, Sarah. Someone who could work outside the usual channels. Someone who understands that sometimes standard procedures are impediments to opportunity. I still have professional obligations. Even if those obligations are about to become moot, Marcus interrupted, his tone still pleasant, but with steel underneath. He pulled out his phone and showed her an email. I believe you'll find this interesting. Sarah looked at the screen and felt her blood turn to ice. It was from the California Bureau of Real Estate, dated that morning. Her license had been suspended due to an anonymous complaint filed 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, when she'd been too overwhelmed with survival to check her professional email regularly. The complaint alleged mishandling of client funds, failure to disclose material facts, and operating without proper insurance. All lies, but proving that would take time and money she didn't have. How did you... I have connections, Marcus said smoothly, pocketing his phone. Connections that could make that suspension disappear as easily as it appeared. Or connections that could make it permanent. The choice is yours. Sarah's mind reeled. This was blackmail or something close to it, but it was also leverage she couldn't afford to refuse. You're asking me to facilitate a sale without a license. I'm asking you to be creative, Marcus corrected. The sale itself will be perfectly legal. You'll simply be listed as a consultant rather than the agent. The money would be wired to an offshore account, then transferred to you as a consulting fee. Completely legal, if unconventional. That's money laundering. That's business, Marcus countered. The question is, do you want to secure your daughter's future, or do you want to cling to principles that have left you 3 days from homelessness? The mention of Emma was calculated, surgical. He'd done his research, knew exactly where to apply pressure. Sarah thought of her daughter's college dreams, of the acceptance letter from USC that had come last week, the one they'd celebrated even though they both knew they couldn't afford it. Emma had said she was happy to go to community college, but Sarah had seen her crying that night when she thought her mother was asleep. What exactly are you asking me to do? Sarah whispered. hating herself for even considering it. Simply facilitate a sale. I have buyers already interested. William and Margaret Thornton, a lovely couple from Switzerland. Old money, very discreet. They're arriving tomorrow. All you need to do is show them the property, handle the paperwork, make them feel confident in their purchase. Off the books regarding your license, of course, but completely legitimate otherwise. Marcus walked toward the house, clearly expecting her to follow. Come, let me show you what you'd be selling. The interior of the house was even more overwhelming than the exterior. The front door, if you could call something that belonged in a museum a door, opened into a foyer with 30-foot ceilings and a chandelier that looked like captured starlight. The floors were marble, so polished Sarah could see her reflection, and not kindly. Every surface, every piece of furniture, every artwork on the walls screamed money in a frequency that made her teeth ache. Marcus led her through room after room, each more impressive than the last. A kitchen with appliances she didn't recognize but knew cost more than cars. A library with floor-to-ceiling windows and a rolling ladder that looked like it belonged in a palace. A home theater with seats that probably cost more than her annual salary when she'd actually had one. A wellness center with equipment that looked like it had been stolen from the future. The wine cellar, Marcus said, pressing his hand against what looked like a blank wall. A hidden door swung open, revealing stairs that descended into what could only be described as a vault. Climate-controlled, obviously. The collection is worth approximately $8 million. Sarah followed him down, her heels clicking on stone that had been polished to mirror brightness. The cellar was a cathedral to alcohol, bottles displayed like religious artifacts, some with dates that preceded the American Revolution. Marcus pulled out a bottle seemingly at random, though Sarah suspected nothing this man did was random. 1947 Chateau d'Yquem, he said, running his finger along the label. $40,000 if you can find it, which you can't. The buyers will want an inventory, Sarah said, trying to focus on practical matters instead of the surreal wealth surrounding her. Already prepared, Marcus said, replacing the bottle with the care of someone handling a newborn. Everything in this house has been cataloged, appraised, and verified. The Thorntons will receive complete documentation. They returned upstairs, and Marcus led her to the master suite, a space larger than most houses. The bed was positioned to face a wall of glass that retracted completely, opening the room to a private balcony that seemed to float over the ocean. The closets were the size of boutiques, filled with clothes that still had tags, shoes that had never been worn. Your wife, Sarah said carefully, she won't be returning? Marcus's expression darkened for just a moment, a flash of something that could have been grief or anger or something else entirely. The doctors say she'll never wake up. She's breathing, her heart beats, but she's gone. Has been for 6 months. I've held on as long as I can, but the medical bills... He trailed off, letting her imagination fill in the blanks. Sarah noticed something odd. The clothes in the closet were all neutral colors, blacks and creams and grays. No personality, no individual style, like costumes rather than a wardrobe. And there was a scent in the air, faint but distinctive, peony and something else, sophisticated and subtle. It tickled something in her memory, but she couldn't place it. The buyers will be here at 2 p.m. tomorrow, Marcus said, leading her back to the main living area. I trust you can handle the showing? Every instinct Sarah had developed in 15 years of real estate was screaming that this was wrong, that she was walking into something dangerous. But every instinct she had as a mother was screaming louder. The commission from this sale would change everything. Emma could go to USC, study medicine like she'd dreamed. They could have a real home again. Stability, dignity. I'll need tonight to prepare, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. Marcus smiled, and it reminded her of a cat who'd cornered a mouse. Of course, I'll email you the necessary documents. And Sarah, this is your chance to change everything. Don't let misguided principles rob your daughter of her future. Sarah spent the rest of the day in a haze of preparation and rationalization. She picked up Emma from school, actually able to put gas in the car without checking her bank balance first. Marcus had handed her an envelope with $5,000 in cash as she left, calling it an advance on expenses. The bills were so new they stuck together, and Sarah had to resist the urge to hold them up to the light like counterfeit. "Mom, what's going on?" Emma asked as they pulled into an actual restaurant parking lot instead of another drive-through. It was nothing fancy, just a chain Italian place, but they hadn't eaten inside a restaurant in 6 months. Did something happen with that man from yesterday? "Maybe a big sale," Sarah said, forcing brightness into her voice. "Could change everything for us, Em." Her daughter studied her with eyes that had seen too much, aged beyond their 16 years by divorce and poverty and disappointment. "Is it legal?" The question hit like a physical blow. "Of course," Sarah said too quickly, too defensively. "Why would you even ask that?" "Because you look scared, not excited," Emma said quietly. "You look like Dad used to look when he was lying about where the money went." That comparison hurt more than Emma could know. Sarah had sworn she'd never become like Jason, never put their family at risk for easy money. Yet here she was, about to facilitate what she knew was probably fraud, possibly worse. "This is different," Sarah said, reaching across the table to take her daughter's hand. "This is our chance, Em. USC, remember? Your dreams?" "My dreams aren't worth you going to jail," Emma said flatly. "No one's going to jail," Sarah assured her, wishing she believed it herself. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah reviewed the documents Marcus had sent. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. The trust documents, the power of attorney, the medical reports on Victoria's condition. It was all there, professionally prepared, legally bulletproof. But something nagged at her. She'd seen thousands of real estate documents over her career, and these felt rehearsed, like someone had thought through every possible question and prepared an answer. She pulled up the California Property Records database, using her login that miraculously still worked despite her suspended license. The mansion's ownership history was convoluted, a maze of LLCs and trusts that led nowhere. The property had last sold 15 years ago to something called Serafina Holdings, but that company's registration led to another company, and another, a Russian nesting doll of corporate structures that made her head spin. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll bury your daughter's future with your own." And Sarah's blood went cold. He was watching her searches somehow, monitoring her. She closed the laptop and went to check that all the doors and windows were locked, even though she knew locks wouldn't stop the kind of trouble she was courting. The next morning, she dropped Emma at school with promises that things were about to get better, trying not to think about how many times she'd made that promise in the last year. Emma hugged her longer than usual, whispering, "Be careful, Mom." Sarah arrived at the mansion an hour before the showing, wanting to familiarize herself with the property's selling points. Marcus was already there, standing on the main terrace with a cup of coffee that smelled expensive even from a distance. "Nervous?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Cautious," Sarah corrected, accepting the coffee he offered. It was perfect, exactly how she liked it, which meant he'd been watching her for longer than she'd thought. "The Thorntons will arrive precisely at 2, Marcus said, checking his phone. "They're very Swiss about punctuality. Show them everything, answer their questions honestly, well, as honestly as necessary. They've already decided to buy. This is just confirmation." How can they have decided without seeing it? They've seen the photos, the videos, the virtual tours. This visit is just ceremony, tradition. Old money likes its rituals. A car arrived at 1:30, a black Mercedes that looked governmental in its seriousness. Sarah expected the Thorntons to be early, but instead a woman emerged who made Sarah's stomach drop. She was tall, elegant, with the kind of bone structure that belonged in a museum. Even from a distance, Sarah recognized her from the society photos. Victoria Blackwood, very much not in a coma. "Darling," Victoria called to Marcus, her voice carrying across the space like a bell. "Is everything prepared?" Marcus didn't seem surprised by his supposedly comatose wife's appearance. "Perfect timing," he said, kissing her cheek, as if this was all perfectly normal. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet my wife, Victoria." Sarah stood frozen, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. "You said she was in a coma." Victoria laughed, a sound like champagne bubbles breaking. "A necessary fiction. Tax purposes, you understand. Much easier to liquidate assets when one is technically incapacitated." "This is fraud," Sarah said, taking a step back. This is business, Victoria corrected, her smile sharp as winter. And you're already complicit, aren't you? Taking money to show a property without a license? Preparing fraudulent documents? Oh yes, we know you've been preparing paperwork. We've been watching. Sarah's phone was in her pocket. She could call the police, the FBI, someone. But Victoria seemed to read her mind. Your daughter's at Lincoln High School, correct? Having lunch in the quad with her friend Melissa? The one with the blue backpack? The threat was clear. They were watching Emma. What do you want? Sarah whispered. Exactly what Marcus told you, Victoria said, examining her perfect nails. Show the house, close the deal, take your commission. The Thorntons are real buyers. The money is real. The sale will be real. The only fiction is our little story about my condition. And who's that hurting really? The Thorntons arrived exactly at 2 p.m., their rental Mercedes pulling up with Swiss precision. William Thornton emerged first, tall and graying, with the kind of posture that came from generations of good breeding and better banking. Margaret followed, younger than her husband by at least 2 decades, blonde and sharp-eyed, missing nothing as she surveyed the property's exterior. Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, Sarah greeted them, her professional smile feeling like a mask that might crack at any moment. Victoria had disappeared into the house while Marcus stood beside her, playing the role of eager seller. Welcome to one of Malibu's most exclusive properties. The photographs didn't do it justice, Margaret said in accented English, her tone giving away nothing. Though photographs rarely do, in my experience. Sarah led them through the house, falling into her professional rhythm despite the circumstances. She pointed out the smart home features, the architectural details, the way the house had been designed to maximize both views and privacy. The Thorntons asked intelligent questions about construction, permits, HOA restrictions, the kind of questions legitimate buyers would ask. The artwork, William said, stopping in front of what looked like a genuine Basquiat. Is it included in the sale? Everything you see is negotiable, Marcus interjected smoothly. We're motivated to make this work for the right buyers. Margaret studied the painting with an intensity that made Sarah nervous. Interesting. This particular piece was reported stolen from a private collection in Hong Kong 3 years ago. The silence that followed felt like it lasted hours, though it was probably only seconds. Marcus's smile never wavered. You must be mistaken, he said easily. We have full provenance documentation. Of course, Margaret said, moving on as if she'd been discussing the weather. Mistakes happen. They continued through the house, the Thorntons making notes, taking discreet photos, asking about everything from the wine cellar's climate control system to the panic room Sarah hadn't even known existed until Marcus demonstrated it. Impressive security, William noted, examining the reinforced walls. One might almost think the owners were expecting trouble. Privacy is paramount in properties of this caliber, Sarah said, sticking to her script even as sweat gathered at the base of her spine. After 2 hours, they'd seen everything. The Thorntons conferred quietly in German, a language Sarah didn't speak but which sounded serious, decisive. We'll take it, William announced suddenly. Full asking price, cash transaction. Quick close. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she pulled out her tablet to begin the paperwork. This was it, the moment that would either save or damn her. There is one small matter, Margaret said, as Sarah was preparing the contracts. We'll need to verify the seller's identity and ownership. Standard procedure for a transaction of this size, I'm sure you understand. Of course, Marcus said without hesitation. Our attorneys can provide whatever documentation you require. Excellent, William said. We'll also need to run standard anti-money laundering checks, verify the source of the property's original purchase, that sort of thing. Regulations, you understand. Something in his tone was off, too casual, like he was reciting lines. Sarah glanced at Marcus, but his expression remained pleasant, unreadable. Whatever you need, Marcus assured them. Transparency is important to us. Margaret smiled, and something about it reminded Sarah of Victoria's sharp expression. How refreshing. In our experience, sellers of properties like this are rarely so accommodating. They signed the initial paperwork, promising to return the next day with their financial advisors to complete the transaction. After they left, Marcus opened a bottle of champagne that had been chilling in the sub-zero. To new beginnings, he toasted, pouring 3 glasses. Where's Victoria? Sarah asked, not touching her glass. Handling other matters, Marcus said vaguely. Don't worry about her. Focus on your success. Tomorrow the wire transfers will complete and you'll have your commission. Sarah took a small sip of champagne, which tasted bitter, wrong, like victory curdled into something else. I should go. I need to pick up my daughter. Family first, Marcus agreed, but his smile suggested he found the concept amusing. That's why we're all here, isn't it, for family? On the drive home, Sarah's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She just facilitated what she knew was likely a fraudulent sale, possibly helped launder money, definitely operated without a license. But $4.5 million, that would solve everything. She stopped at the grocery store, buying real food for the first time in months. Organic vegetables, actual meat, even some of the expensive ice cream Emma loved but never asked for anymore. The total came to $200, and Sarah paid cash from the envelope Marcus had given her, trying not to think about where the money might have come from. When she got home, Emma was already there, which didn't make sense. School didn't let out for another hour. Mom, Emma said, her face pale, standing in their small living room. There are people here. That's when Sarah saw them. 3 people in dark suits with the kind of serious expressions that meant her life was about to implode. FBI badges came out before she could even process what was happening. Sarah Mitchell, the lead agent, a woman with steel gray hair and exhausted eyes, said, "You're under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and operating without a real estate license." The grocery bags fell from Sarah's hands, organic eggs splattering across the worn linoleum, the expensive ice cream immediately beginning to melt. There must be some mistake. The Thorntons aren't Swiss buyers, Ms. Mitchell. They're federal agents. And you just helped facilitate what you knew was an illegal transaction. As they cuffed her in front of her daughter, Sarah's last coherent thought was that the champagne had tasted bitter because it was poisoned with her own greed. She'd walked into the trap with her eyes wide open, convinced she was too smart, too desperate, too justified to get caught. Emma stood frozen, watching her mother being arrested, and the look in her eyes, disappointment mixed with resignation, as if she'd been expecting this, was worse than the handcuffs. The interrogation room at the federal building was aggressively bland, beige walls that seemed to absorb hope, fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty, and a mirror that everyone knew was one-way glass. Sarah had been sitting there for 4 hours, her wrists aching from where the handcuffs had been too tight, when Detective Jennifer Collins finally walked in. Collins was the kind of woman who could make a pantsuit look like armor. Mid-40s, silver streaking through dark hair she didn't bother to dye, eyes that had seen too much but still held a spark of compassion. She carried 2 cups of coffee and a tablet, setting 1 cup in front of Sarah without asking if she wanted it. "Sarah," she said, sitting down across from her, her voice surprisingly gentle. "You've been played, but I think you know that already." "I want a lawyer," Sarah said automatically, the words coming out cracked and dry. "You can absolutely have one, should have one, but first, I want to show you something that might change your perspective on this situation." Collins pulled out her tablet and turned it towards Sarah. "This was recorded yesterday, about an hour after you left the mansion. On the screen was security footage from what looked like a medical facility, the kind with soft lighting and expensive art that catered to wealthy patients who wanted their health care to feel like a spa. Marcus walked through the corridors with the confidence of someone who belonged there, someone who'd made this walk many times before. He entered a room and the camera angle switched to show the interior. Victoria Blackwood sat up in bed, very much not in a coma, working on a laptop that probably cost more than Sarah's car. Even in the grainy footage, Sarah could see her fingers flying across the keyboard with the speed of someone running a business empire, not recovering from traumatic brain injury. "She's been running a fraud ring from that room for 6 months, Collins explained, pausing the video. "The coma story was a complete fabrication. The mansion? It's not even theirs. They're sophisticated con artists, but con artists nonetheless." Sarah's mind reeled, trying to process the layers of deception. But the documents? Forged, very well forged, professionally done, but fake nonetheless. "Sarah, you were specifically chosen for this. Your financial situation, your desperation, even your suspended license. That complaint was filed by them 3 weeks ago to make you vulnerable, to put you in a position where you'd have to accept their offer. The door opened, and Sarah's world tilted completely off its axis. Jason walked in, her ex-husband, looking sheepish but wearing a suit she'd never seen him able to afford when they were married. His shoes were new, expensive, the kind he'd always wanted but they could never justify buying. "Hello, Sarah," he said quietly, not quite meeting her eyes. "You son of a—" Sarah started to stand, rage giving her strength, but Collins held up a hand. "Mr. Reeves has been cooperating with us," Collins said carefully, though her tone suggested she wasn't happy about it. "He's been working with the Blackwoods for 8 months. The divorce, draining your accounts, the mistress in Cabo. It was all designed to put you in a desperate enough position to take their bait." Sarah felt like she might vomit. The room spun, and she gripped the table to keep from falling over. "You destroyed our family for what? Money." "They promised me $2 million, Jason said, finally looking at her, and she could see something that might have been regret in his eyes. "I was in debt, Sarah, gambling debts to people who don't accept payment plans. They offered me a way out, said all I had to do was create a situation where you'd be desperate enough to take any deal. I didn't know it would go this far. I thought you'd just give up, move back to your mother's—" "My mother abandoned me when I was 5, Sarah screamed, the words ripping from her throat. "You knew that. You knew I had nowhere to go. You knew what this would do to Emma." Collins intervened, her voice cutting through Sarah's rage. "Sarah, there's more. The mansion, we've been trying to find out who really owns it. The trail is complicated. Shell companies layered on shell companies, overseas accounts, trusts within trusts. But we think the real owner might be someone you know." She pulled up another document on the tablet, swiping through pages of corporate registrations and trust documents until she found what she was looking for. It was a trust document, but not the recent one Sarah had seen. This one was older, much older, dated 25 years ago. The beneficiary's name made Sarah's blood run cold, the coffee in her stomach turning to acid. Diane Foster, her mother's name. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "She's probably dead. I haven't seen her in 33 years. She left when I was 5 and never came back." "We don't think she's dead," Collins said gently, watching Sarah's face carefully. "We think she's been watching you, and we think she's the real mastermind behind all of this." The room started spinning harder. Sarah gripped the table until her knuckles went white. Her mother alive? Not just alive, but rich enough to own a $30 million mansion, orchestrating her destruction from the shadows? "I need you to help us," Collins continued, her voice steady, anchoring Sarah to reality. "Wear a wire, meet with Victoria, get her to admit to everything. In exchange, we'll give you full immunity. No charges, no jail time. You walk away clean. And if I don't, you're looking at 20 years minimum. Money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy, these are serious federal charges. Your daughter goes into foster care. Everything you've fought for disappears. Everything you've sacrificed becomes meaningless." Sarah thought of Emma's face when the FBI had arrested her. The disappointment, the fear, the shame. Her daughter had been through so much already, had been so strong. She couldn't let this be how Emma remembered her. Couldn't let her mother become another cautionary tale about choosing easy money over hard truth. "I'll do it," she said quietly, the words feeling like surrender and salvation at the same time. Collins nodded, professional but not without sympathy. "Good. We're setting up a meeting tomorrow. Victoria wants to meet you at the mansion. Apparently she has something special planned. We'll wire you up, have agents nearby. All you have to do is get her talking." "What about Emma? Is she safe?" "We've had agents watching her since this morning," Collins assured her. "We knew the Blackwoods might use her as leverage. She's safe, Sarah. We won't let anything happen to her." The wire felt like it was burning through Sarah's skin as she drove back up the winding road to the Malibu mansion the next afternoon. Collins had assured her it was undetectable, state-of-the-art technology that would pick up everything while being invisible to any scanning equipment. But Sarah felt like she had a neon sign on her chest announcing her betrayal. The gates opened automatically as they had before, but this time it felt less like a welcome and more like jaws closing behind her. The mansion looked different in the late afternoon light. Less golden palace, more gilded tamam. The shadows were longer, darker, and the house seemed to loom rather than inspire. Victoria Blackwood was standing in the living room when Sarah entered, positioned perfectly to be backlit by the setting sun like she was posing for a portrait. In person, without the pretense of being Marcus's absent wife, she was even more striking. Tall, elegant, with the kind of bone structure that Renaissance artists would have killed to paint. But her eyes were cold, calculating, with a predator's patience. "Sarah," she said warmly, as if they were old friends meeting for tea. "So good to finally meet you properly. Marcus has told me so much about you." "You were supposed to be in a coma," Sarah said, unable to think of anything else to say. Victoria laughed, the sound like crystal breaking in slow motion. "Yes, well, sometimes we have to play roles we don't enjoy. You understand that, don't you? After all, you've been playing the successful real estate agent even though your license was suspended, playing the devoted mother while putting your child at risk, playing the victim when you walked into this with your eyes wide open." "Why me?" Sarah asked, moving further into the room, aware that Collins had told her to get as much confession as possible. "Why go through all this trouble to destroy my life?" Victoria walked to the massive windows overlooking the ocean, her movements fluid and practiced, like a dancer who knew every step. "Do you know what your father did for a living, Sarah?" The question was so unexpected that Sarah stumbled over her response. "He was in finance. Investments." "He was a corporate raider," Victoria corrected, her tone shifting from warm to Arctic. "He destroyed companies, sold them for parts, left families destitute. 20 years ago, he targeted my family's business. We made medical devices, heart monitors that saved premature babies, insulin pumps that gave diabetics normal lives. We were doing good in the world. Your father saw profit margins and destroyed 3 generations of work in 6 months." Sarah's mouth went dry. She remembered her father coming home excited about some big deal when she was 18, taking them all out to celebrate at the most expensive restaurant in the city. She'd never asked for details, never wanted to know where the money came from. "My father killed himself," Victoria continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "The shame, the failure, the loss of everything he'd built. He couldn't bear it. My mother had a stroke 3 days later. I lost everything. But then I met someone who understood, someone who had also been wronged by your family." The door to the terrace opened, and Sarah's knees nearly buckled. A woman in a wheelchair was pushed in by Marcus. She was older, grayer, but the eyes were unmistakable. The same eyes Sarah saw in the mirrors every morning, the same nose she'd passed on to Emma. "Hello, sweetheart," Diane Foster said, her voice exactly as Sarah remembered it from childhood dreams and nightmares. "You look well, considering the circumstances." Sarah couldn't speak. Her mother, after 33 years. Here, in a wheelchair, but very much alive and apparently orchestrating her destruction. "You left," Sarah finally managed, the words coming out as barely more than a whisper. "You abandoned me." "You chose him," Diane replied coldly, no warmth in her voice, no recognition that she was speaking to the daughter she'd birthed. "During the divorce, when the judge asked you who you wanted to live with, you chose your father. Do you remember?" Sarah did remember. She'd been 5, terrified, confused. Her father had been the one holding her hand in court, whispering that everything would be okay. Her mother had been distant, cold, already pulling away like Sarah was a stranger's child. "I was 5 years old." "Old enough to choose wrong," Diane said, adjusting her position in the wheelchair with movements that seemed too fluid for someone supposedly disabled. "I've been watching you for years, Sarah, watching you struggle, make the same mistakes, trust the wrong people, just like him. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree." So you destroyed my life, had Jason betray me, set me up for federal crimes?" "I gave you a chance to prove you were different," Diane said, her tone suggesting she was the reasonable one here. "The mansion, my mansion by the way, bought with money I made after I left your father's poisonous influence, was a test. Would you do the right thing when tempted? Or would you be just like him, cutting corners, breaking laws for profit?" Sarah felt the wire against her skin, remembered Collins was listening, recording every word. This was it, the confession they needed. So this was all revenge? Sarah said loudly, clearly. You, Victoria, Marcus, you all conspired to frame me? Frame you? Victoria laughed. We didn't make you take the deal, Sarah. We just knew you would. Like father, like daughter. The corruption is in your blood. That's when Sarah noticed movement in the doorway. Emma stood there, her school backpack still on her shoulders. Her daughter, who should have been at school, was here, in this house of horrors. Emma! Sarah started toward her, maternal instinct overriding everything else. But Jason appeared behind their daughter, his hand on Emma's shoulder in a grip that looked protective, but was clearly restrained. I brought her, Jason said, not quite meeting Sarah's eyes. She deserved to know the truth about her family. The truth? Emma said, her young voice steady despite the insanity of the situation. The truth is that you're all insane. She looked between Sarah and the grandmother she'd never known existed, processing betrayals that no 16-year-old should have to understand. Every single one of you. Emma, sweetheart, Sarah started, but her daughter held up a hand, the gesture so adult it was heartbreaking. No, Mom, you took an obviously shady deal because you were desperate. Dad, she glared at Jason with contempt that made him step back. You destroyed our family and for money. And you, she looked at Diane with eyes that held no warmth for the grandmother she'd never known. You're just evil, plain and simple evil. Diane's composed facade cracked slightly. I'm trying to protect you, granddaughter, from becoming like them, from the poison in your bloodline. By destroying my mother, by leaving me with nothing, by orchestrating this elaborate revenge fantasy? Emma's voice was rising, her teenage control finally breaking. You're not protecting anyone. You're just a bitter, horrible person who abandoned her child and now wants to pretend it was noble. Careful, child, Victoria said coldly, moving closer to Emma. You're in no position to judge anyone. You're here helpless, surrounded by adults who've been playing this game longer than you've been alive. Emma laughed, and it was a sound far too mature, too knowing for her age. Actually, I'm exactly in position to judge. And you're all going to jail. She pulled out her phone and held it up, showing a recording app that was clearly running. I've been recording everything for the last 10 minutes, streaming it directly to a cloud server that the FBI can access. Sarah's mind reeled. Collins had been worried about the wire being detected. But Emma, you little... Marcus started forward, his composed mask finally slipping, but stopped when they heard sirens in the distance growing louder. I've been working with Detective Collins for 3 weeks, Emma said calmly, her voice steady now that she'd revealed her hand. Ever since I found emails on Dad's computer about this whole scheme. She approached me, told me everything, asked for my help. Mom, I know you're wearing a wire, but they were worried about signal jammers in the house. My phone was the backup plan. Victoria moved faster than Sarah would have thought possible for someone in designer heels, grabbing for Emma's phone. But Emma just smiled, stepping back. Already uploaded. Plus, Detective Collins has been watching through my phone's camera this whole time. Hi, Detective. She waved at her phone's camera. You can come in now. The sirens were getting louder, and now they could see the flashing lights coming up the winding road. Diane's face had gone pale, her hands gripping the wheelchair's armrests with white knuckles. You set us up, she said to Emma, disbelief in her voice. Your own family. No, Emma said firmly, her young voice carrying absolute conviction. Mom is my family. You're just the woman who abandoned her. Dad's just the man who betrayed us. And you two, she looked at Victoria and Marcus, you're just criminals who picked the wrong mother to mess with. The doors burst open with professional efficiency. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn but not aimed, clearly prepared for resistance but hoping to avoid it. Collins was with them, her expression grim but satisfied. Victoria Blackwood, Marcus Blackwood, Diane Foster, Jason Reeves, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority. You're all under arrest. The charges include conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, extortion, and about a dozen other things the U.S. attorney will explain in detail. As they were being cuffed, Diane looked at Sarah one last time. I did this for you, she said, and for the first time there was something that might have been genuine emotion in her voice. To make you strong. No, Sarah said quietly, finding her voice at last. You did it for yourself. You've been sitting on millions while I struggled to feed my daughter. That's not tough love. That's just cruelty. That's just revenge for a choice a 5-year-old made. As Jason was led past, he tried to speak to Emma, but she turned away, showing him her back. The message was clear. He was dead to her. Collins approached Sarah as the others were led away, the house suddenly feeling empty, despite all the agents processing the scene. The wire did cut it out, but Emma got everything we needed. You're clear, Sarah. All charges dropped. Sarah pulled Emma into a fierce hug, holding her daughter like she might disappear. How long have you known? 3 weeks. Collins approached me after she found Dad's connection to the Blackwoods through his gambling debts. She said you were in danger but would never believe it without proof. So I played along, pretended I didn't know anything. You're 16. You shouldn't have had to. Mom, I've been watching you kill yourself trying to keep us afloat for 2 years. If playing spy for a few weeks could save you, it was worth it. Besides, Emma pulled back, a small smile on her face. It was kind of cool. Collins says I have a future in the bureau if I want it. Sarah laughed, the sound surprising her. After everything, her daughter could still make her laugh. The next week passed in a blur of FBI interviews, depositions, and revelations that made Sarah's head spin. Each new detail that emerged painted a picture of a conspiracy that was both elaborate and deeply personal. A web of revenge and greed that had taken years to construct. Victoria and Marcus weren't just random criminals. They were sophisticated con artists who specialized in high-end real estate fraud, but they'd never attempted anything on this scale before. Diane had found them through what the FBI called dark web talent acquisition, essentially hiring them like contractors for a very specific job. Destroy Sarah's life in a way that mirrored how Diane believed her own life had been destroyed. The elaborate story about Victoria's family business being destroyed by Sarah's father was partially true, but it had been a different company, a different corporate raider. Victoria had simply adopted the story because it played well, gave her motivation that seemed genuine. She was an actress playing a role, and she played it perfectly until Emma's phone had captured the truth. Jason's betrayal went even deeper than Sarah had imagined. He'd been in debt from gambling. That much was true, but it went back years, not months. Diane had been watching Sarah's marriage deteriorate and had approached Jason when he was at his lowest, offering to clear his debts and give him a new life if he helped push Sarah to rock bottom. Every fight they'd had in the last year of marriage had been orchestrated, every cruel word calculated. Even his mistress had been hired, an actress paid to post those photos from Cabo. Your mother is a piece of work, Collins said, sitting with Sarah in a coffee shop near the federal building, going over the final details before the case went to the grand jury. She's built an empire worth close to $200 million, all while keeping tabs on you from a distance. How, Sarah asked, stirring her coffee absently. How does someone go from abandoning their family to becoming that wealthy? She's brilliant, Collins admitted grudgingly. IQ off the charts, according to the psychological evaluation. After she left you and your father, she went to Silicon Valley, started a series of tech companies under assumed names. She was one of the early investors in several companies that became household names. She's been living in Monterey under the name Diana Fitzgerald for the past 20 years. Sarah processed this information, trying to reconcile the mother who'd left her with this tech mogul who'd orchestrated her downfall. The mansion? Legally purchased 15 years ago through a series of shell companies. She kept it as an investment, but also, we think, as a potential stage for this exact scenario. She's been planning some version of this for a very long time. What about Victoria's claim about my father? Was any of that true? Collins pulled out a file. Your father was involved in hostile takeovers, that's true. He did destroy companies for profit, but the specific company Victoria mentioned, that was fabricated for emotional impact. Your mother fed her the story, gave her the motivation to make it believable. Sarah felt sick. Her entire life had been manipulated, orchestrated, turned into some sick revenge play. What happens now? Your mother is looking at 20 to 30 years, Collins said. The fraud charges alone would be significant, but the conspiracy charges, the extortion, using federal agents' identities, The Thorntons were real agents whose identities were somehow compromised. That's what will really bury her. Victoria and Marcus are looking at 15 to 20 each. She paused. Jason made a deal. He'll do 3 to 5, probably out in 2 with good behavior. He destroyed our family for money and he gets 2 years? He cooperated fully, provided evidence we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And honestly, he was a tool, not a mastermind. Your mother manipulated him almost as much as she manipulated you. Sarah didn't feel any sympathy for her ex-husband, but she understood the legal reality. What about the mansion? That's where things get interesting, Collins said, pulling out another document. Because the property was used in the commission of federal crimes, it would normally be seized, but there's a complication. She handed Sarah a document that made her hands shake. It was a will dated 5 years ago, signed by Diane Foster. Your mother had this drawn up years ago, Collins explained. In the event of her death or incarceration, everything goes to you. The mansion, the money, all of it. Sarah stared at the paper. I don't want it. I don't want anything from her. I understand, but think about Emma. That property is worth $30 million, and there's another $170 million in various accounts and investments. Even after legal fees and taxes, you're looking at enough money to secure not just Emma's future, but her children's futures. Sarah looked out the window of the coffee shop, watching normal people living their normal lives, unaware of the insanity that had just unfolded in her world. It's blood money. It's justice, Collins countered. Your mother tried to destroy you. Instead, she's given you everything she built. There's poetry in that, don't you think? There's something else, Collins continued, her tone shifting. The FBI uses consultants in complex fraud cases, people with real estate expertise who can help unravel property-based crimes. The pay is excellent, 6 figures to start, and you'd be helping prevent what happened to you from happening to others. My license is suspended. Was suspended. Given the circumstances, the complaint was fraudulent, filed as part of a criminal conspiracy. It's being reinstated with full apologies from the board. They're actually terrified you might sue them. Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in so long, she'd almost forgotten what it was. Genuine hope. Not desperate hope, not the kind that came from dangerous deals, but real legitimate hope for a future that didn't require compromise or crime. Can I think about it? Of course, but Sarah, you survived something that would have broken most people. Your daughter is remarkable because you raised her. Don't let what they did define you. Let it refine you. That evening, Sarah and Emma sat in their small apartment, eating Chinese takeout from containers, the same cheap place they always ordered from. But somehow it tasted better, knowing it wasn't their last meal before disaster, knowing tomorrow would come without fear of eviction or arrest. We could move, Emma said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. If you sold the mansion, we could go anywhere. Start fresh where nobody knows what happened. Is that what you want? Emma considered, poking at her lo mein with chopsticks. I don't know. My friends are here. School is here. But everyone knows what happened now. Dad being arrested, Grandma being some psycho revenge mastermind who hired actors to destroy you. It's a lot. Rebecca asked me if we were going to have a reality show. Sarah reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. We don't have to decide anything right now. We have time. For the first time in 2 years, Emma agreed. Then more seriously, are you going to visit her? Sarah knew who she meant. I don't know, maybe. Not yet. Detective Collins says she's been asking about us. About me specifically. You don't owe her anything, Em. She made her choices. I know, but I'm curious. What kind of person abandons their child and then spends 30 years planning revenge because that child chose to stay with the other parent? It's clinically fascinating. Sarah smiled slightly at her daughter's clinical detachment. When did you become so mature? Someone had to be the adult in this family, Emma said with a slight smile. By the way, Detective Collins called while you were in the shower. She said there's something else about the mansion you need to know. Something about the trust documents that no one noticed at first. The next morning, Sarah met Collins at the Federal Building. The detective led her to a conference room where boxes of documents were spread across a long table. The physical evidence of Diane Foster's decades-long scheme. We've been going through your mother's papers, Collins explained, pulling on latex gloves before handling the documents. She was meticulous, kept records of everything, every receipt, every bank transfer, every email. It's like she was building an archive of her own crime. Sounds like her, Sarah said, remembering how her mother used to organize everything in their house with obsessive precision. But we found something unexpected, Collins continued, pulling out a thick folder. This isn't recent. This is from 25 years ago. She handed Sarah a document. It was a trust agreement, but not the fraudulent one she'd seen at the mansion. This was older, the paper yellowed with age, the typing from an actual typewriter, not a printer. I don't understand, Sarah said, reading through the legal language that seemed designed to confuse. Your maternal grandfather, William Foster. Did you know him well? He died when I was 3. I barely remember him. Mom never talked about him. He was wealthy, very wealthy. Old San Francisco shipping money, plus smart investments in early tech companies. When he died, he left everything in trust. Your mother was the trustee, but she wasn't the beneficiary. Sarah's hands started shaking as she reached the relevant section. The beneficiary was listed clear as day, Sarah Ann Mitchell, née Foster. The mansion, the money, all of it, it was always yours, Collins said gently. Your mother could manage it, grow it, but she couldn't spend it on herself. The only way she could access the funds was for your direct benefit, education, housing, medical care. But she left. She abandoned me. Look at the conditions. Collins pointed to another section, the legal language suddenly crystal clear. If the trustee abandons or estranges the beneficiary, control automatically transfers to the beneficiary on their 30th birthday. You're 38 now. Sarah's mind reeled. So for the last 8 years, you've been the legal owner of everything. Your mother hid it, created shell companies, moved money around to make it invisible. But legally, it's all yours. Has been since you turned 30. Sarah sat down hard, the chair creaking under the sudden weight. But the revenge plot makes no sense if she knew you owned everything, right? Collins pulled out another document. This is where it gets complicated. Your mother has been diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. The psychological evaluation suggests she may have genuinely forgotten about the trust conditions during manic episodes, or she may have convinced herself they didn't apply. She's mentally ill, severely, untreated for most of her adult life from what we can tell. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it might explain the illogical nature of it. She spent millions of dollars and years of planning to destroy someone who already owned everything she had built. Collins pulled out one more item, a letter, handwritten, never sent. We found this in her apartment. It's addressed to you, dated 5 years ago. Sarah read, My darling Sarah, by the time you read this, if you ever do, you'll know everything. You'll hate me, and you have every right to. The truth is harder than the story I've told myself all these years. I left when you were 5 because I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and the doctor said I needed medication that would make me stable, but also make me ordinary. I was too proud, too afraid of losing my edge, my brilliance. Your father was right to fight for custody. I was becoming dangerous, not physically, but emotionally. The highs were too high, the lows too low. I've spent 30 years building empires and destroying them, making fortunes and losing them, all while watching you from a distance. The money I made, it was all yours, always yours, but I couldn't face you. How do you tell your daughter you chose your madness over her? The revenge fantasy started during a manic episode 3 years ago. I convinced myself you had betrayed me, that you were just like your father, that you needed to be taught a lesson. I hired Victoria and Marcus, set the plan in motion. But even in my mania, I couldn't bring myself to really hurt you. Every safeguard, every loophole, I built them in. Part of me always knew this was wrong. Your father wasn't evil, just ambitious and careless with people's lives. You're neither. You're strong and good and everything I should have been. The money is yours. It always was. Use it to give Emma the life you deserved. She's remarkable, by the way. I've watched her too. She has my intelligence but your heart. That's the best possible combination. I know forgiveness is impossible. But please know that every cruel thing I did came from love, twisted by mental illness and decades of regret. I'm my own cautionary tale. Your unworthy mother, Diane. Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It didn't excuse anything, but it explained everything. The elaborate revenge plot wasn't about revenge at all. It was about a mentally ill woman trying to make contact with the daughter she'd abandoned, but only knowing how to do it through manipulation and pain. She's getting treatment now, Collins said quietly. In federal custody, she has no choice. Proper medication for the first time in years. The doctors say she's different on medication, quieter, horrified by what she's done. I can't, Sarah said. Not yet, maybe not ever. That's fair, but Sarah, you need to decide about the assets. The government will need to sort through what was used criminally versus what was always rightfully yours. The clean money, the original inheritance, that's clearly yours. The rest gets complicated. Sarah thought about Emma, about college, about the future they could have. I'll take what's mine, what was my grandfather's. The rest can go to the victims of their other frauds. Collins nodded. There's one more thing. Your mother made a request. She wants to see Emma. Just once, supervised in federal custody. She says she wants to apologize, to explain, before she's transferred to federal prison. That's Emma's choice, Sarah said firmly. I won't make it for her. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the office of Mitchell and Associates real estate fraud investigation, watching her team of 8 investigators working at their computers. The office was in a modest building in Encino, nothing fancy, but it was hers, bought and paid for with completely legal money from her grandfather's trust. She'd sold the Malibu mansion to a tech executive for $32 million, using the proceeds to start her company and establish the Foster Foundation for Mental Health Awareness. The irony of naming it after her mother wasn't lost on her, but it felt like turning poison into medicine, transforming a legacy of untreated mental illness into hope for others. Emma was thriving at her private school, not the most expensive one they could now afford, but the one with the best STEM program and college counseling. The teenager who'd had to be the adult was finally getting to be a kid again, albeit one who occasionally consulted with the FBI on cybersecurity cases. Collins had become something of a mentor to her, showing up for school events when Sarah was working, becoming the stable adult presence Emma needed. Mom, Emma called from the reception area where she was doing homework while waiting for Sarah to finish. Your 3 o'clock is here. Sarah's 3 o'clock was Tom Harrison, a middle-aged contractor who'd been scammed out of his life savings in a real estate fraud eerily similar to what had almost happened to her. Sarah was taking his case pro bono, the first of many she'd handle for free. Mr. Harrison, she greeted him warmly, noting his calloused hands and worried eyes. I've reviewed your documents. We're going to get through this together. As she led him to her office, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked different than she had a year ago. Not younger, the stress had added lines around her eyes, but stronger, more certain. The designer clothes she could now afford hung well on her frame, but she'd kept them understated, professional rather than flashy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Collins. New case, real estate fraud ring targeting elderly victims in Pasadena. You interested? Sarah typed back. Always, send me the files. She'd found her purpose in the ruins of her life. Not just surviving, but helping others survive. The FBI consulting work paid well, very well. But more importantly, it meant something. Every scammer she helped catch, every victim she helped recover their losses, it was like fixing a small part of what had been broken in her own life. That evening, Sarah and Emma sat on the balcony of their new apartment. Nothing ostentatious, but with a view of the mountains and enough space that they each had their own bathroom, a luxury that still made them both smile. They were reading, a comfortable silence between them that had become their evening ritual. I want to see her, Emma said suddenly, not looking up from her AP chemistry textbook. Sarah knew immediately who she meant. Are you sure? I've been thinking about it for months. She's my grandmother, whatever else she is. And Collins says she's different on her medication. More human. It's your choice. I'll support whatever you decide. Will you come with me? Sarah considered. If you want me to. The visit was arranged for the following week. The federal medical facility was in downtown Los Angeles, all concrete and security cameras, and the kind of institutional bleakness that seemed designed to drain hope. Sarah and Emma went through multiple security checkpoints, their possessions searched, their IDs checked and rechecked. Diane was waiting in a visitor room that looked like a hospital cafeteria. She was smaller than Sarah remembered, or maybe the orange jumpsuit just made her seem diminished. Her hair was completely gray now, pulled back in a simple ponytail. But the most striking difference was her eyes. They were clear, present, without the manic energy Sarah remembered from childhood. "Sarah," Diane said, her voice soft, uncertain. "Emma, thank you for coming." Emma studied her grandmother with the same intensity she brought to her science experiments. "You're on medication now." "Lithium and risperidone," Diane confirmed. "I should have been on them 35 years ago, but I was too proud, too afraid of being ordinary." "Ordinary isn't the worst thing," Emma said, her young voice carrying weight beyond her years. "Mom's ordinary. She's also the strongest person I know." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I see that now. The medication doesn't make me ordinary. It makes me capable of seeing clearly. And what I see is that I destroyed the two best things in my life." "Why, Sarah asked, the question erupting from somewhere deep. "Why the elaborate scheme? Why not just reach out?" "Because I'd built a narrative for 30 years that you'd betrayed me by choosing your father. It was easier than admitting I'd abandoned you." The mania fed the narrative, made it bigger, more complex. By the time I was planning the whole thing with Victoria and Marcus, I genuinely believed I was teaching you a necessary lesson. She paused, her hands trembling slightly. "The medication makes me see it for what it was, a mentally ill woman's desperate attempt to matter in her daughter's life, even if it was as a villain." "You did matter," Sarah said quietly. "Every day of my life, I wondered why I wasn't enough to make you stay. You were everything. You are everything. I was just too sick to see it." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 decades of pain filling the sterile room. "I study genetics," Emma said suddenly. "Mental illness has a hereditary component. Bipolar disorder specifically has a heritability of about 70%. Diane nodded. "It's something you should watch for. Both of you. My father had it too, though it was never diagnosed. He self-medicated with alcohol." "Is that why you left me the money?" Sarah asked. "Guilt. The trust was my father's doing. He knew something was wrong with me even before the diagnosis. He structured it to protect you from me. As for the will leaving you everything else." Diane considered her words carefully. "I wrote it during a stable period. I knew I'd eventually self-destruct. I wanted something good to come from all the damage." "The FBI says you built an empire worth $200 million, Emma said, clinical curiosity in her voice. "How does someone do that while mentally ill?" "Mania can be productive in short bursts. The energy, the confidence, the willingness to take risks. It's perfect for entrepreneurship, but it's also destructive. I built 3 fortunes and lost 2 of them during the depressive episodes. What's left is just what I couldn't destroy before the next manic phase hit." A guard appeared at the door. "5 minutes." Sarah looked at her mother, really looked at her, for the first time in 33 years. She saw neither the monster of her nightmares nor the savior of her childhood memories. Just a sick woman who'd made terrible choices. "I can't forgive you," Sarah said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to understand that the mother who left you and the woman who tried to destroy you, they were both sick. The real me, the medicated me, loves you, has always loved you, just couldn't show it in any healthy way." Emma stood up. "I might write to you. Questions about family medical history, genetics, that sort of thing." "I'd like that," Diane said, hope flickering in her eyes. As they were leaving, Diane called out one last time. "Sarah, take care of yourself. Get regular psychiatric evaluations. Both of you break the cycle." In the car afterward, Emma was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "She's nothing like I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more evil, I guess. Instead, she's just broken." Sarah reached over and took her daughter's hand. "Mental illness doesn't excuse what she did, but it does explain it. Are you going to get tested? for bipolar? Already have. I'm clear, but I'll keep monitoring. You should get tested when you're older. I will, Emma said. Then, with a slight smile, though if I develop it, at least we can afford good psychiatrists now. It was dark humor, but it made Sarah laugh. They could afford good psychiatrists, good schools, good lives. The money that had been meant to destroy them had instead become their salvation. 1 year later, at Emma's high school graduation, Sarah stood in the crowd taking pictures like every other proud parent. Emma was valedictorian, her speech about resilience and the power of truth earning a standing ovation. She'd been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship, planning to study computer science and criminal justice. My mother taught me that integrity isn't about never falling, Emma said from the podium, her voice clear and strong. It's about how you choose to get back up. It's about facing the truth, even when lies would be easier. It's about breaking cycles, even when repeating them would be simpler. After the ceremony, as they were walking to the car, Sarah noticed a familiar figure in the parking lot. Jason stood by a beat-up Toyota, wearing a cheap suit, clearly having come to see his daughter graduate despite the restraining order. Emma saw him too. For a moment, father and daughter looked at each other across the parking lot. Then Emma did something that surprised Sarah. She nodded. Just once, an acknowledgement of his existence. Nothing more. Jason nodded back, then got in his car and drove away. He's still your father, Sarah said carefully. He's a weak man who made terrible choices, Emma corrected. But he's got 2 more years of prison to think about them. Maybe he'll do better when he gets out. They got in their car, a reliable Honda, nothing flashy despite their ability to afford more, and drove home to their apartment. That night, they had a small party with Collins and some friends from school. It was perfect in its normalcy. Later, standing on the balcony, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here. The mansion she'd sold, the mother she'd found and lost again, the ex-husband who'd betrayed them, the elaborate scheme that had nearly destroyed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, joining her with 2 cups of tea. "How strange life is," Sarah said. "A year ago, I thought getting that commission would save us. Instead, losing everything saved us." "We didn't lose everything," Emma corrected. "We found out what we actually had, each other, truth, strength we didn't know existed." Sarah's phone buzzed. Collins. With another case. A family in Orange County being systematically defrauded by someone posing as a real estate attorney. "Go," Emma said, seeing Sarah's expression. "Save someone else. That's what you do now." Sarah hugged her daughter, then went inside to review the case. She had work to do. People to help, justice to serve. The mansion on the cliff had been sold to strangers who would never know its history. Victoria and Marcus were serving their sentences, their con artist days over. Jason was in minimum security, reportedly taking classes to become a substance abuse counselor. And Diane was in federal psychiatric detention, writing letters to Emma about genetics and family history, slowly building the only relationship her illness would allow. Sarah had been shocked to discover who really owned the mansion. But the greater shock was discovering who she really was, not a victim of elaborate schemes, but a survivor who'd turned suffering into purpose. As she worked late into the night on the new case, Emma studying for her MIT placement tests in the next room, Sarah realized that the real inheritance hadn't been money or property. It had been the chance to break a cycle of mental illness, abandonment, and betrayal. The mansion had never been the real prize. The real prize was the life they'd built from its ashes, honest, purposeful, and truly their own. Sarah saved the case file and closed her laptop. Tomorrow, she'd meet with the family in Orange County. She'd help them navigate the fraud, recover what they could, and rebuild what they'd lost. It's what she did now, turned other people's worst days into new beginnings. The woman who'd walked into that mansion, desperate for a commission, had been transformed into someone who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in millions, but in the ability to sleep peacefully, live honestly, and face each day knowing you'd chosen integrity over easy money. Emma appeared in the doorway. "Mom, Collins just called. She says the U.S. attorney wants to offer you a full-time position, special agent in charge of real estate fraud investigation, federal benefits, pension, the works." Sarah considered. "What do you think?" I think you've already decided, Emma said with a knowing smile. You've been wanting to do more than consulting. She was right. Sarah had decided the moment she'd heard the offer. Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, she said, trying it out. It has a nice ring to it. Better than inmate Sarah Mitchell, Emma said dryly. They both laughed, the sound filling their modest apartment with something money couldn't buy. Genuine joy born from survival, truth, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter who'd faced the worst and chosen to become their best. The mansion was gone, but what they'd built in its place was worth infinitely more. And this time, it was truly, legally, eternally theirs.